China's story begins long before written memory, in a time when mist curled over the fertile plains of the Yellow River and early human communities slowly learned to shape the land rather than merely survive upon it. And in those distant ages, where myth and history blend into one another, tales speak of ancient sage rulers like the Yellow Emperor, a legendary figure said to have brought order, governance, and the earliest seeds of Chinese civilization to a scattered people, guiding them toward unity and shared identity. And though modern historians debate the literal truth of such figures, their symbolic importance remains immense, for they represent the origin of a civilization that would endure longer than almost any other on Earth. And as centuries passed, these early tribal societies evolved into more structured forms of rule, eventually giving rise to what is traditionally known as the Xia dynasty. Often regarded as China's first dynasty, though archaeological evidence remains debated, yet whether fully historical or partially legendary, the Xia laid the groundwork for hereditary rule and organized society, which would become more clearly visible in the succeeding Shang dynasty, a period marked by remarkable advancements in bronze metallurgy, where artisans crafted intricate ritual vessels and weapons, reflecting both technological sophistication and deeply rooted spiritual beliefs. And during this time, the earliest known form of Chinese writing emerged on oracle bones, where diviners inscribed questions to ancestors and deities, seeking guidance on everything from harvests to warfare, revealing a culture profoundly connected to the spiritual world. And as the Shang rulers governed through a combination of military power and religious authority, their dominance eventually gave way to the Zhou dynasty, which introduced one of the most enduring political ideas in Chinese history: the mandate of heaven, a concept that justified a ruler's authority as divinely granted yet conditional upon just governance, meaning that natural disasters, famine, or rebellion could be interpreted as signs that heaven had withdrawn its support, thus legitimizing the overthrow of unjust rulers. And this idea would echo through centuries of dynastic change, shaping how power was understood and justified. Yet the Zhou period itself was far from stable, for as central authority weakened, regional lords gained increasing autonomy, leading to the fragmentation of the realm into competing states during the spring and autumn period, followed by the even more chaotic warring states period, an age defined by relentless conflict but also extraordinary intellectual flourishing, as philosophers and thinkers sought solutions to the disorder surrounding them, giving rise to what is often called the 100 schools of thought, among whom Confucius stands as one of the most influential figures, teaching that harmony in society could be achieved through proper conduct, respect for hierarchy, and devotion to family and moral virtue, ideas that would later become the cornerstone of Chinese social and political life, while Laozi, associated with Taoism, offered a different vision, emphasizing harmony with the natural order, simplicity, and the mysterious flow of the Tao, encouraging individuals to align themselves with the rhythms of the universe rather than imposing rigid control. And alongside these philosophical traditions, legalism emerged as a more pragmatic and often harsh approach, advocating strict laws and centralized authority as the means to maintain order. And it was this philosophy that would ultimately guide the state of Qin as it rose to dominance among the warring kingdoms, culminating in the dramatic unification of China in 221 BCE under Qin Shi Huang, a ruler of immense ambition and equally immense ruthlessness, who declared himself the first emperor and set about reshaping the newly unified empire with sweeping reforms, standardizing writing, currency, weights, and measures to ensure cohesion across vast territories, while also launching massive construction projects such as the early Great Wall to defend against northern invasions and the construction of his own monumental tomb guarded by the famous Terracotta Army, an entire underground legion crafted to accompany him in the afterlife. Yet despite these achievements, his rule was marked by severe authoritarianism, including the suppression of intellectual dissent through the burning of books and the persecution of scholars, policies that bred resentment and unrest among the population. And after his death, the Qing dynasty quickly collapsed, unable to sustain its rigid system, giving way to the rise of the Han dynasty, which would usher in one of China's most celebrated eras, blending the administrative strengths of the Qin with the moral philosophy of Confucianism to create a more enduring and balanced system of governance. And under the Han, China expanded its territory, strengthened its economy, and opened trade routes that would become known as the Silk Road, connecting China with distant regions across Central Asia and even reaching the Roman Empire, facilitating not only the exchange of goods like silk, spices, and precious metals but also the transmission of ideas, technologies, and cultural practices, while within China. Innovations such as papermaking, advancements in metallurgy, and developments in science and medicine significantly improved daily life and administrative efficiency, and as Confucian ideals became deeply embedded in the civil service system, education and merit began to play a more central role in governance, though the Han Dynasty was not without its challenges, for over time, corruption, factionalism, and external pressures began to weaken the state, leading to widespread unrest and eventually its fragmentation, plunging China once again into a period of division known as the Three Kingdoms. A time later romanticized in literature as an era of heroic figures, strategic brilliance, and dramatic battles, where rival states competed fiercely for dominance. And though this period has been immortalized in stories of loyalty and valor, in reality it was marked by instability and hardship for ordinary people, and following this era, China remained divided for several centuries, with various short-lived dynasties rising and falling, until the Sui dynasty managed to reunify the country in the late 6th century, undertaking ambitious projects like the Grand Canal, which linked the agricultural south with the political and military centers in the north, significantly enhancing economic integration and state control. Yet the Sui's heavy taxation and forced labor led to discontent, resulting in its rapid downfall, and it was succeeded by the Tang dynasty, widely regarded as a golden age of Chinese civilization, where art, culture, and international exchange flourished to unprecedented levels, as the capital city of Chang'an became one of the largest and most cosmopolitan cities in the world, attracting merchants, diplomats, and scholars from across Asia, the Middle East, and beyond, creating a vibrant cultural tapestry. And during this time, poetry reached extraordinary heights, with figures like Li Bai and Du Fu capturing the beauty and complexity of life through their verses, while Buddhism continued to spread and integrate with native traditions, enriching the spiritual landscape of the empire. And yet even this golden age was not immune to decline, as internal rebellions and political instability gradually weakened the Tang, leading once more to fragmentation, as the once glorious unity of the Tang dissolved into the turmoil of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period, where short-lived regimes rose and fell in rapid succession across the northern plains while independent kingdoms carved out their own spheres of influence in the south, creating a patchwork of competing powers that struggled to assert lasting control. And yet even amid this political instability, cultural and economic life did not vanish but instead adapted, evolving in ways that would shape the next great era. And from this fractured landscape eventually emerged the Song dynasty, which reunified much of China and ushered in a period defined less by military conquest and more by intellectual, technological, and economic brilliance. As cities expanded, commerce flourished, and innovations transformed everyday life, including the widespread use of paper money, the refinement of printing techniques that allowed knowledge to spread more rapidly than ever before, and the development of the compass and gunpowder, inventions that would ultimately influence the entire world, while the Song government strengthened the civil service examination system, embedding Confucian ideals even more deeply into the structure of society, creating a class of scholar officials whose influence extended into every corner of governance. And although the Song excelled in culture and innovation, it faced persistent threats from powerful neighbors to the north, including the Liao and Qing dynasties, which eventually forced the Song court to retreat southward, marking the division between the northern and southern Song. And despite this loss, the southern Song continued to thrive economically, with bustling trade networks and vibrant urban centers, until a new and formidable force arose from the vast steppes beyond China's borders, the Mongols, whose rise under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors would alter the course of Eurasian history. And as Mongol armies swept across continents with unmatched speed and ferocity, they eventually turned their attention toward China, where after decades of conflict, Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, completed the conquest of the Song and established the Yuan dynasty. becoming the first non-Han ruler to govern all of China, and under the Yuan, China was integrated into a vast empire that stretched from Eastern Europe to the Pacific, facilitating unprecedented levels of trade and cultural exchange along routes like the Silk Road, as merchants, travelers, and envoys moved across great distances, bringing with them ideas, technologies, and goods, and it was during this time that figures such as Marco Polo would journey to China, later recounting tales of its wealth and grandeur to audiences in Europe. Yet despite these connections, Mongol rule was often resented by the Han Chinese population, as the Yuan government maintained a rigid social hierarchy that placed Mongols and other foreign groups above native Chinese, creating tensions that would eventually contribute to the dynasty's decline, and as natural disasters, economic difficulties, and widespread rebellion weakened Yuan authority. A peasant uprising led by Zhou Yuantang ultimately succeeded in overthrowing Mongol rule, leading to the establishment of the Ming Dynasty in 1368, restoring native Chinese governance and ushering in another era of strength and cultural achievement, as the Ming ruler sought to consolidate power, rebuild infrastructure, and reinforce traditional values, strengthening the Great Wall into the formidable structure recognized today and revitalizing agriculture and commerce, while the early Ming period also witnessed remarkable maritime expeditions led by the Admiral Jinghe, whose vast fleets sailed across the Indian Ocean, reaching as far as East Africa, showcasing China's naval capabilities and fostering diplomatic and trade relationships with distant lands. Yet despite these outward-looking ventures, the Ming eventually turned inward, limiting overseas exploration and focusing on internal stability, and over time, corruption within the court, combined with fiscal strain and external threats, began to erode the dynasty's strength, paving the way for yet another dramatic shift in power, as the Manchus, a people from the northeast, seized the opportunity to invade and establish the Qing dynasty in 1644, marking the beginning of China's last imperial dynasty, and under Qing rule, China expanded its territory to its greatest historical extent, incorporating regions such as Tibet, Xinjiang, and Mongolia, while maintaining a complex system of governance that balanced Manchu authority with existing Chinese administrative practices, allowing for a degree of continuity even as a foreign ruling class held power. And during the early Qing period, China experienced relative stability and prosperity, with population growth, agricultural expansion, and flourishing arts and culture. Yet beneath this apparent strength, challenges were slowly emerging, particularly as Western powers began to expand their global influence, seeking trade opportunities and access to Chinese markets. And tensions between China and these foreign nations escalated dramatically in the 19th century, culminating in the Opium Wars, conflicts that exposed the Qing dynasty's military weakness and forced China into a series of unequal treaties that granted significant concessions to foreign powers, including the opening of treaty ports and the cession of Hong Kong to Britain, developments that not only undermined China's sovereignty but also contributed to widespread internal unrest, as many Chinese citizens grew increasingly disillusioned with the Qing government's inability to defend the nation's interests, and this dissatisfaction erupted in massive uprisings such as the Taiping Rebellion, one of the deadliest conflicts in human history, which devastated vast regions of the country and further weakened the already struggling dynasty. And despite attempts at reform through movements aimed at modernizing industry, military capabilities, and education, these efforts were often too limited or too late to reverse the decline, and by the early 20th century, the Qing dynasty was on the brink of collapse, as revolutionary ideas spread and calls for change grew louder, ultimately leading to the 1911 revolution, which overthrew the imperial system and brought an end to over 2,000 years of dynastic rule, replacing it with the Republic of China, a new political experiment that sought to build a modern nation-state but faced immense challenges from the outset, including political fragmentation, warlordism, and external threats, as regional military leaders competed for power and central authority remained weak, while foreign powers continued to exert influence over Chinese affairs. And amid this turbulent environment, new political movements emerged, most notably the Nationalist Party, or Kuomintang, led by Chiang Kai-shek, and the Chinese Communist Party, founded in the early 1920s with figures such as Mao Zedong rising to prominence. And although these groups initially cooperated in an effort to unify the country, their alliance eventually broke down, leading to a prolonged and bitter civil war, which was further complicated by the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War. As Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China in 1937, bringing widespread destruction and suffering, including atrocities such as the Nanjing Massacre, and during this time, Chinese forces, both nationalist and communist, were forced to resist the external threat while navigating their internal for power, and following the end of World War II and Japan's defeat, the Civil War resumed with renewed intensity, ultimately resulting in the victory of the Communist Party in 1949. When Mao Zedong declared the founding of the People's Republic of China, while the nationalist government retreated to Taiwan, creating a division that remains a significant aspect of Chinese geopolitics to this day. And under Mao's leadership, China embarked on a radical transformation, as the new government sought to reshape society through sweeping reforms, including land redistribution and the collectivization of agriculture, aiming to eliminate old social hierarchies and build a socialist state. Yet some of these initiatives, particularly the Great Leap Forward, had devastating consequences, as unrealistic production targets and flawed policies led to widespread famine and the loss of millions of lives. And this period was followed by the Cultural Revolution, a decade-long movement that sought to purge perceived enemies of the revolution and reinforce ideological purity, resulting in significant social, cultural, and economic disruption. As schools closed, intellectuals were persecuted, and historical artifacts were destroyed, leaving a profound impact on Chinese society. And after Mao's death in 1976, a new era began under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, who introduced a series of economic reforms that shifted China away from strict central planning toward a more market-oriented system, opening the country to foreign investment, encouraging private enterprise, and fostering rapid industrialization, which led to unprecedented economic growth and lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, transforming China into one of the world's major economic powers. And as cities expanded and technology advanced, China increasingly integrated into the global economy, becoming a central player in international trade and manufacturing, while continuing to maintain its unique political system under the leadership of the Communist Party. And in the 21st century, China has continued to evolve, balancing its ancient heritage with modern ambitions, investing heavily in infrastructure, education, and technological innovation, while also expanding its influence on the global stage through initiatives such as the Belt and Road, seeking to build connections across continents reminiscent of the ancient Silk Road. And as the nation looks toward the future, it carries with it the weight of thousands of years of history, a story marked by cycles of unity and division, triumph and hardship, innovation and tradition, all woven together into a vast and enduring narrative that continues to shape not only China itself but the wider world, like a great river flowing ceaselessly through time, reflecting the resilience, complexity, and enduring spirit of a civilization that has never truly faded but instead continually reinvented itself across the ages.